I'm delighted to say we have Roger Waters in the building. Roger, how are you?
I'm a bit jet-lagged, thank you for asking.
You? How jet-lagged? Really rubbish?
No, I'm all right. I'm not too bad, yeah. I've been here for a couple of days, so I'm okay.
We're recording this interview on the day Barry Manilow is in the building. When I walked in, lots of fans outside. I was thinking, well, I know the popularity of your good self over the years, but I wasn't expecting sort of screaming fans out there. Have you ever been in the same building as Barry Manilow before?
I don't recall. No. It's quite possible that I have, but I don't recall. What did interest me, though, just having finished this big tour of the United States, was that they had autograph books. I mean, I did sign some autographs downstairs, and they're in books. And I thought, how refreshing is that? Because normally, you know, in the States, it's a big industry. So it's scratch plates and drum heads and, you know, things they then screw to a cheap Fender, and it goes on eBay, and it's on eBay the next day.
So you actually were quite reassured by the
I thought it was rather sweet nature. Yeah, I liked that. It reminded me of going to Fenner's in Cambridge when I was a little lad, you know, and getting, you know, Lumsden and some of the people who played for Cambridge University when I was young.
Who were the autographs that you really would have sought, given the chance?
Actually, autograph hunting was not a big thing for me, I have to say. It was only just a period when I was maybe 9 or 10. Cricketers, you know. I do remember Peter May and the Bedser twins.
What about the Arsenal team? Would you queue up for that?
Not for their autographs, really. No, I'm not really into autographs, though I did recently buy last year for Poppy Day. I can't remember who they were playing, but they had these blue away shirts with poppies embroidered on the front. And I'm not ashamed to say that I gave quite a lot of money to charity, and I've got the Robin van Persie one at home with all my Pelé shirts.
I was reading about your tour last night, and it's the O2 Arena Wednesday the 11th of May, and it goes, you know, lots of dates there. Then it's Manchester, Birmingham for the Wall tour. And I was trying to remember the first time I heard anything from the Wall, and I'm absolutely convinced it was on John Peel. I think John played Another Brick in the Wall, one of the first people to play it. And I remember I was a student at the time thinking, because at the time he was playing all punk stuff. That's what he was playing. It's 1978. That's what he was doing. Then out of that, Another Brick in the Wall. And it's difficult to remember the musical kind of times from which this came.
He was such a loyal beast, was Peel. What a lovely man he was. I absolutely adored him. But he was a huge fan of ours when we were cutting edge, you know, back in 1966 or something. And by the time the Wall came round, he'd sort of rather decided, I think, that we'd joined the mainstream, and he was more interested in punk, as you say. But so it was probably out of some sense of loyalty that he would play a track from the Wall.
I mean, maybe it was the Islington Kids, wasn't it? Sing the We Don't Need No Education. I wonder if it was, you were mainstream and you were phenomenally successful, but there's something about the spirit of punk and rebellion still manifestly right in the middle of this work, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the performance that Nick Griffiths, who was our engineer at Britannia Row, who organised all those recording sessions, because we were all in America at the time, and the performance that he got out of those kids from Islington Green School was quite phenomenal. You know, they're talking about making a movie about Alan, whatever his name was, the teacher. And, you know, and how he got fired in the end and went off to live in Australia, I think. And
what, for allowing the kids to sing that stuff?
Yeah, well, he took them to Britannia Row off his own bat, I think, without asking the headmistress. And there was a huge furore about it because of the lyrics. They were miffed by one thing, and one thing only, and that was that when the record company decided that there should be a video, the kids who'd actually done the singing were not allowed to go and lip sync to the thing, so they weren't in the ones who actually did the singing weren't in the video, which is a shame.
Yeah, I know there are many teachers and head teachers who weren't that enamoured of that particular chorus because they got it chanted back at them for quite a few years afterwards.
But I mean, credit where credit's due. It also became a huge talking point, and the number of letters I get from all over the world, from school teachers and school children alike, who use the Wall in general, but Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 specifically, as it's sort of a part of the curriculum now. And performances of the Wall, because I have to give permission if anybody ever performs it as a piece in any kind of dramatic way, and I never ever think about anything that's to do with the school or school children or children. I automatically give them permission to do it, and it gets performed by kids all over the world, you know, hundreds of times a year, which is great. It makes me happy.
And on the one hand, it's about you and about your life. And all the other things that it's about, I mean, you wrote recently, it's to illuminate our condition and encourage peace and understanding. I mean, how do you see what it means now?
Well, when I decided to go back on the road with it, which I only did quite recently, I had no interest really in trying to replicate what we did with the Floyd in 1979. It needed a new kick, a new twist, something there. And I realised that I was less interested now in the angst-ridden story of the miserable young Pink, who's sort of mainly me with a bit of Sid and a bit of a few other people from rock and roll thrown in, but much more interested in a more general story of how nations build walls between themselves and other nations. And so there are these walls that exist politically between nations and religions and ideologies, and that the microcosm of the story of that disaffected young man could equally be expressed as a broader story about more important issues. And so that's what we've done. The more important issues being... Well, there's a wall between rich and poor, there's a wall between north and south. We construct walls, or the powers that be construct walls, in order to control us by identifying evil ones beyond some kind of a barrier. And if you can describe an enemy or an evil one or somebody who's different than we are, it makes it easier for us to be isolationist, and it makes it easier for our governments to control what we are and what we do, and to keep us nice and passive and quietly consuming so that they can retain power and keep making all that dosh.
Tell us about the practicalities of this wall tour, Roger. I mean, you've already done it, as you've mentioned, it's US, Canada, Mexico and so on, and now you're in the British and European league. Technically, the difference will be astonishing between the first one, which sort of only rolled up in a few cities, didn't it? Never really played to many people.
No, yeah, in London it was just, I think we did it 6 times in Earl's Court, and then came back a year and a half later and did another 6.
Is there any footage of that?
Yeah, there is, and I've been editing it.
Compare and contrast that with what you're doing now.
Technology has moved on so much in the intervening 30 years, and the main differences are in sound quality, which has improved beyond anything you can imagine. Suddenly that big wall of mud and slap off the back wall of buildings like Earl's Court or the O2 became controllable, and they can now make, if you put enough time and trouble into it, you can make sound that is really, really beautiful in really buildings that are not designed acoustically. So there's that. But the projection systems, back in the day we were restricted to using 3 sprocketed 35mm projectors like you'd find, in the old ABC down the Brompton Road. And they were unbelievably unreliable and dim. They were so dim.
Younger listeners won't even have heard the phrase sprocketed film before. It sounds quite racy.
Yeah, well, it's like kind of old-fashioned film. And now we're projecting very high-res video, and we project from 5 stations with 15 projectors, and we get great luminosity, A, and B, when in 1979 we could only project across 90 feet of the middle of the wall, we can now project across 244 feet. So we're projecting an image that's nearly 100 yards wide, bright, and in perfect focus. So it's quite remarkable.
Roger Waters is here. We'll play a bit of I think we have to play another Brick in the Wall, don't we?
Play what you like, mate.
Okay. Official sanction from Roger Waters to play this. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. Roger Waters is here. London O2 Arena, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 11th to the 18th of May. Then to Manchester on the 20th and 21st. Then in June it's Birmingham on the 27th. Manchester Evening News Arena on the 28th. I can't imagine you being nervous before a show like this, but when there is it's not just you, clearly. There is a huge team involved. Do you get nervous for yourself or behalf of the whole product? I mean, do you still have nerves?
No, I get excited, and so when I'm about to go on, though I have to say, the beginning of this show is quite spectacular. We have pyro in the show, but it's all in the first minute.
So don't be stuck in the bar.
Yeah, don't be stuck in the bar for the beginning. It's quite head turning, and of course it's like turning on a tap of adrenaline. I'm standing there behind the chicken run waiting to make my entrance, and the band start, and boom, and I go on, and it's it's a big rush, and the flow of adrenaline from that moment on doesn't stop until about 4 hours after we finish, you know. So I never go to bed after a show. I can't. It's impossible. Usually have something to eat, you know, a couple of glasses of wine, and I could either then sit staring at the wall, or what I normally do is I have DVDs made every night of the show, and I sit and watch them every night, and I make notes and what to fiddle with the next day.
Are you staring at a wall or the wall?
No, a hotel room wall.
It's an interesting state to be in. Have you always been like that? I mean, when did you stop being nervous? When you felt in control, in command of the whole show?
Yeah, I think so. I can remember back in the early days, you know, being nervous going on stage. I remember it brings back going on stage at the Albert Hall back in Saucerful of Secrets days, opening with Grantchester Meadows, which opens with just me playing an acoustic guitar on my own. And the lights went down, and I looked down at my hand, and I could see my fingers were shaking. You know, I was shaking like a leaf. I sort of managed to play it, but I was really, really nervous. I can't remember the last time I was nervous like that. I'm excited now. It's a huge buzz. Also, I enjoy it a lot more than I did, you know, back in the days. Rather famously, you know, back in the 70s, I was sort of a bit angry about all kinds of things. And now I'm not. I love performing. I really enjoy the engagement with the audience.
But also at that stage, I mean, if I remember this right, that stage of Pink Floyd's history, it was all kind of falling apart, wasn't it? So it must have been, I imagine, quite unpleasant. Yeah,
it was falling apart a bit, although I think we did some terrific work together, and I'm not knocking that period of our career at all, but really, after Dark Side of the Moon, it was a process of fragmentation. But we made some great records, you know. Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall were some of our best work.
And I've been trying to check on the latest figures, and it's a little bit, I find it a little bit confusing because it depends when the stats come out. Glenn Povey, Pink Floyd biographer, says Dark Side is the world's second best-selling album. I'm sure you follow all these lists and everything, but where does is The Wall the bestseller?
I have no idea. No, absolutely not. I know a little bit. I've no idea. I don't follow any of it. I know a tiny bit about what happens in America because I've seen it printed, and I know The Wall is the third biggest selling album of all time after the Eagles' Greatest Hits and Thriller. And I'm not sure where Dark Side of the Moon comes. But that's slightly unfair, I think, on Dark Side of the Moon because The Wall was a double album sold for double price. I think they give it double points.
Interesting company to be in, though. The Eagles and Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And yourself.
Hey, listen. I mean, I still wake up and pinch myself and think, how the hell did this happen, you know? Going all around the States first and Mexico and Canada, and now going all over Europe. And I mean, in America we played to ecstatic audiences and ecstatic reviews. People really love this piece, and we do put on a hell of a production, I have to say, and we've had fantastic reviews everywhere without exception, and so it's a lot of fun.
Is there anything out there that you hear that in the sort of broad pop and rock and roll world that you think that's interesting? I remember reading an interview that Mark Ellen did with you for the Word magazine in 2008, which he was trying to persuade you to re-examine Radiohead. Yeah, because you said no, I'm not interested, and then he said, actually, I think you should go back and have another go, and you said, okay, I'm happy to go back and re-examine. Did you, and what did you think?
Funnily enough, I watched a little film of them in a studio, but mainly because I was interested in the DP, who's called Brett. Can't remember his second name. Anyway, he's going to be working on filming this show. And he's
Brett. Everyone calls him Brett.
Brett somebody or other. Excuse me, Brett. I'm really bad with names. I'm sure they're very good. It just sort of, it goes past me somewhere that doesn't really connect with me. When things do connect with me, they tend to be really simple kind of melodic things, and I tend to listen to the same things over and over again. So I will listen, you know, to Leonard Cohen, or, you know, or more recently, the last album I played to death was Dirt Farmer, and that's been out a couple of years now, which was Livon Helms.
Livon Helms, fantastic record.
Amazing record, really, really beautiful. You know, and before that, I became very enamoured of Ray LaMontagne, you know, the Trouble album, which I thought was beautiful. The whole album, I think, is really beautiful. But sort of modern kind of rock and roll and pop groups, I don't go there.
There's a quote on your website about The Wall, which I think you discovered something that you said when it came out first time. So this is a bit bizarre, I'm quoting you, but anyway, you said, in 79. Will the technologies of communication in our culture serve to enlighten us and help to understand one another better, or will they deceive us and keep us apart? Is the verdict in yet?
Yeah, well, that was me quoting me from, I think, 22 years before then. So that's a quote from like the early 80s, I think. Isn't it fascinating what's happening?
It was a very prescient quote, wasn't it?
It was.
It was rather wise.
It was, yeah. It was very prescient. And isn't it fascinating that in 2009, when in Tehran they protested the rigged elections there, and that protest was crushed, it is absolutely clear that it wouldn't have had the effect that it did on the rest of us if it hadn't been able to escape via people's iPhones.
And does that make you think that the message of the wall is as prescient, well, second time I've used that word, but is as valid now as it was in 1979?
I think it's more. I think it's more important now. And I think the chances of us understanding one another as well are greatly increased. I think the chances of more of us, whether we live in Tehran or Madison, Wisconsin, of understanding that our politics, our religion, our belief structures, our economic situation, and so on and so forth, are accidents of birth and geography, and that there is no us and them. We are them and they are us. I mean, it sort of goes back, to some of the stuff I was writing about in Metal all those years ago.
All those years ago. Listener Jim Breeds asks, are there any surprise guests in the band lineup?
No.
There you go. That's that sorted. Roger, a privilege to have you on the show. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.